months since you last heard from us. To kind of recap, so I founded the company 2012, literally in my bedroom. It's kind of cliche story, but it's true because I had no money and I had nowhere to start the company. So why not start in your bedroom? And I wouldn't recommend building satellites in your bedroom, to be honest. Needs must and all that. We've launched 41 satellites now into orbit. I'll come on to that later on, but we've really been launching a lot in the last sort of 12 months. We've launched nearly half of all the satellites we've ever launched in the last 12 months. We launched 18 in the last year, 41 in our total of the company, which is quite a lot of satellites now. It's starting to get into the numbers where there's like some serious volume happening. It's cool, really getting that regular service going, so I'll come on to that in a sec. Folks may be aware we're a Y-Combinator company. So for those of you who don't know YCombinator, it's a program in the States that funds interesting, high-tech, high-potential growth companies and their famous early investments on Airbnb and those sort of folks. So in terms of Silicon Valley, that's like pretty much the best route you can take in early stages to get a YC investment. So really fortunate they were our first ever investor, first guys on the cap table, so that's pretty cool. And we provide lots of different stuff, obviously launches, Vibe stuff. We do platforms for people when they need that, but to be honest, we don't really prioritize that. And we've worked with lots of folks. Obviously, you heard from TU Delft this morning. UME, Stanford's obviously a big name. There's tons of people we work with now. Too many to put on a slide, to be honest. So yeah, the mission statement of the company really started around the whole idea of democratizing access to space, which is very similar to really what I see PodCube's goal is to democratize access to space. And really, I wouldn't say we have democratized access to space yet because it's a very subjective thing, like what is democratizing access to space? But I certainly feel like Alba launch in particular has really dropped the bar in terms of like barriers to entry. So like a lot more folks are flying PodCubes and satellites than were maybe 10 years ago, especially in the PodCube community. And I feel like the PodCubes really, and Alba launch in particular, has really helped drive that. And you're seeing folks who maybe would only fly one satellite now flying 4, 5, 6 satellites, So there's lots of examples of not only people flying once, but having programs now at the sort of university level or startups or whatever the sort of organizational mechanism is. And this is sort of an example of it. So we have obviously the ROM guys there. So you'll probably hear from them later on. In the clean room with Martin, loading up AlbaPod full of ROM satellites or other satellites, and then we launched these satellites pretty regularly now, which is pretty cool. And to me, this is what democratizing access to space looks like. It's regular, easy, affordable access to space for the missions you want to fly when you want to fly them. And really the high level of it, I sort of used the MassSat one, which is the BME guys. So they started off with a 1U CubeSat. It was really hard to get the second CubeSat funded. They dropped down to doing a 1P, and since then I think they've flown 4 or 5 satellites at the PodCube standard. And that's really because historically, at least, it was like 6 figures to fly a CubeSat, which really, I think, put a lot of folks off. And now, obviously, it's a little bit cheaper to fly a CubeSat, but I think what we're seeing in the data is that it's not about just flying one satellite, it's about flying lots of satellites and what's the time between your missions, right? So, like, it's great that somebody done a one-off CubeSat once, whenever, but, can you go, annually, and, how can you support that annual cadence? And PodCubes really allow folks to fly regularly and repeatably and ultimately iterate their technology much quicker than you otherwise could on a bigger platform. So yeah, by reducing the size, we reduce the launch costs. So yeah, just to kind of clarify what I was saying earlier in terms of the launch cadence in particular. So I just took this off of Wikipedia earlier. So the list is so long you can't actually get on a screen grab anymore, which is like how many PodCubes have been launched. So as of Friday, we put 4 more in orbit on SpaceX. It's a non-transport mission. It's a Project 425, which is a Korean mission. So hopefully some of you guys caught that. So far, we've launched 41 out of 83 PodCubes to orbit. So we're around about 50% of all the PodCubes ever flown have flown with Alba Orbital, which is kind of cool. Something we're really proud of, something, we really, we love the communities growing, and we want to grow with the community, and I really want to just provide a regular launch service for those guys. And if you actually look at the numbers, I was going to do a full breakdown of all the numbers and stuff, but I didn't really have time to do all the analysis, but Since 2019, we launched on the 6th of December. So basically 4 years ago, we launched Cluster 2, which was our first mission on Rocket Lab, and we launched 6 satellites. So 79 of 83 satellites have launched in the last 4 years. So if there was a curve, the CubeSat community grew like much more unilaterally, much more smoother. In the last so from year 0 of CubeSats to year 10, there's 101 CubeSats launched. From year 0, which would be 10 years ago, 2013 of PocketCubes, to 2023, there's been 83. But in the first 6 years of PocketCubes, there was only 4 launched, So the year 6 to year 10 split for our community has been much quicker growth, and I think that's kind of folks doing secondary missions much quicker than they did in the CubeSats. You see a lot of people flying one mission and then not following it up for a while. So you're seeing that folks are flying and they're flying again. So to use the ROM guys as an example, they flew the first mission in June, and then we flew them again in November, So that's like a high school team that started out that's flown twice this year, which is super impressive, And we're seeing that from a lot of different customers. So yeah, it's really exciting. So yeah, a big thing for me is what does cadence mean? Because cadence is a subjective term, right? So I think it needs to be a point where you're not gated. You don't have to worry about launch and worry about getting a launch. So a little bit of a story. The first time I ever bought a PocketCube launch was in 2015. Contracted with a company called 𝗖ście. I just seen the launch in 2013. Got some funding from 𝗖ście Artes project. Managed to put my proposal, got a price, great, cool, sign up. And then, so 2015 happened, 2016 happened, 2017 happened, 2018, 2019, still no launch. In 2020, we pulled off that launch because it got delayed. Basically, it seemed like indefinitely. Ultimately, that mission did fly in 2021, but that was a 6-year wait. And obviously, it's very hard to really keep any sort of momentum into a project or a company or anything if you have to wait 6 years. So really, in the last 4 years, we went from 6-year waits to monthly, months waits. So we're really cutting that down. And obviously, as a lag time, you have to build your satellite, you have to license your satellite, you have to test your satellite. So it's not like people are buying launches and flying next week. It's not quite that level yet, but we are seeing people literally go from signing to an orbit in 6 months. That's not uncommon now. But actually, especially when they're doing the second and third one, so maybe they already have their licensing in place, maybe they already have a process in place for building their satellites. And I think that's really exciting, to see that. In terms of the 4 launches this year, I'm not going to bore you with every single one, and there's so many now, it's really hard to keep up with what we're actually doing. So we've done a January launch with an Alba pod, 2 unicorns. We did a June launch with 2 Alba pods, 6 satellites, which I think 1 was a unicorn, and the rest were rideshare customers. So I had 5 rideshare customers in that. November, it's Transport 9. We had 2 more Alba pods, 6 satellites, 2 of which were unicorns, 4 would be rideshare customers. And just the Friday there, so 1st of December, we flew 2 Alba pods, 4 satellites. So I think we're at 7 Alba pods now for the year, and 18 satellites, which, this is kind of what I think really needs to happen in the community. And now we're actually putting that out there to say, hey, we can get in orbit regularly. And to be honest, a lot of it's just been working with SpaceX and deorbit on the Ion vehicles and being able to launch really quickly. And, huge props to Martin and the launch team for being able to do that, because, it's been super hard to go from a launch every 6 years to a launch every quarter. And we're there. So, folks shouldn't have to wait forever on a launch. So yeah. Can you maybe click that one? So this is pretty cool. This is a video of the deployments. So this was actually this is Satla, Unicorn 2i, and I can't really see the other guy. Istanbul, yeah. So you can see this is just basically chucking out Alba pod in orbit. You see the Earth on the left. So this is the second pod. So we've got some more customers in there, a bunch of folks that are with us today. So yeah, that's the first time I think there's ever been a video of PocketCubes in space, which is kind of cool. And we're able to validate a bunch of things from that. We can sort of figure out tumble rates. We try and figure out ejection velocities. And I think as well, it's just really cool to show people, like, actually, this is us deploying stuff. Because up until that point, we had photos of the pod in orbit and photos of the pods. We had like a before and after shot of one pod where before it deployed and then after it deployed, but we had never actually seen a deployment. So that was super cool to get that footage. Can you thingy me? Next slide. Yeah, so Alba Pod. So basically, I think everyone's aware, or if they're not aware, the deployer we use for the pod cubes is called Alba Pods. We've been using V2 for some time. I mean, pretty much the first flight was a V2 pod, although V2 has somewhat improved over time. We've changed a bunch of stuff on it, but, well, not a bunch of stuff. We changed some sort of minor things on it. But it's, the most flown pod in PodCube history. It's the most reliable pod in PodCube history. And we've been working on the V3 Alba Pods, so that should hopefully be debuting next year. So Stephen, who works with us, has been working on that. We haven't really made an announcement on that yet, but I guess we kind of are today. So hopefully next year we'll be flying that. And the main thing with V3 is we're changing a lot of the mechanisms and stuff on it. So the mechanisms we have just now are third party, and there's some challenges around things like supply chain and lead times and costs and things like that. So we won a development project with the Scottish Government to develop a sort of next generation pod based on all the learnings from I don't know how many, probably like double digits Alba Pod V2s now that went to orbit, like probably 13, 14-ish, but I'm not really sure exactly. I need to count it. Launch costs, so we've always kept our prices the same. So like, I think that's kind of really important because especially if you put a proposal in and you say, well, how much does it cost to launch PodCube? And you say, right, 25K for 1P. Then if people start moving the price around, then that can create problems too. And we've always tried to be transparent. So 25K, 40K, 60K, 1P, 2P, 3P. And people seem to like that because, we're kind of overwhelmed with demands. So we're really happy that folks are happy on that front. So like cheap regular launch is really important, but there's also other pieces to the puzzle. So often you find teams that are doing their first ever satellite have never really considered things like vacuum testing, like we chatted about earlier. So vacuum bakeout or vibe testing, and these are mandatory tests that every satellite has to do no matter what. And often if it's like a new country or a new team, like they maybe don't even have this in their regions. So we offer up easy booking, sort of no questions asked. You come in, you book it online, do your test. We can do the test for you. We did the ROM3 satellite for the ROM guys, for the Vibe. We've actually done CubeSats, believe it or not. It's maybe a dirty word, but we have done CubeSats for folks whose in-house facilities weren't available. And yeah, it's sort of really just trying to make it easy. There's a lot of test houses we've dealt with externally that are quite hard work sometimes, like in terms of just like getting in, so like you're trying to get a date, and they need to provide support for that. So we've kind of taken the approach of, well, if you guys want to come in, then like we'll try and support you. Just like it's a weekday. Like go through the website. It's just like booking, any sort of service you'd expect online. So you go on, book your slot, show up, and then we'll support your test campaign. It gets rid of like the email chains, which can be a little bit frustrating for folks, especially sometimes like other test houses maybe have like a big client comes through and you kind of get kicked out as well because you're maybe not the number one priority of their facilities. Progress in orbit with the unicorns. So this is pretty cool. So folks might have seen the announcement on Friday that we made contact with K. And we actually now made contact with J as well. So this Unicorn 2J, Unicorn 2K, which were launched back in November, but they were deployed on Tuesday and Wednesday last week. These are the healthiest unicorns we've ever had, thankfully. We've had lots of trials and tribulations with the unicorn, as people may or may not be aware. There's a unicorn 2 on the stand if you haven't seen a unicorn sort of with its wings out, but you can go have a look at it. Unicorn 2 is basically, the whole idea was to try and make a capable PodCube. So often when you run into people who are maybe not true believers of the PodCube standards, they say, yeah, this is cool. Or they maybe say, well, it's maybe useful for like education use cases, or it's maybe useful for really niche things that serious missions can't be done on this, and serious throughput and serious data can't be done. So Unicorn 2 was always an attempt to try and demonstrate that you could miniaturize an ADCS, you could, get a deployable wing, you could get, half the payload of the satellite half the satellite's payloads in terms by mass and by volume. It's a proper small satellite. It does everything a big satellite can do. But unfortunately, making it small and making it reliable is actually pretty hard. Turns out. But I think we're finally getting there. So literally, my understanding is the Alba guys were actually running passes this morning at the conference. So I heard that, so that's pretty cool. And the cool thing about it is we've had no resets after 75 hours in orbit, which is, for us, is unusual. We had a lot of power issues, and Andy can probably go into more of it tomorrow. He's done a talk as well. He's the engineering team leader. But the thing I guess I've kind of appreciated at PodCubes is, well, you can often do stuff. The margins of error are very small. So your power budget margin, your link budget, they're very tight. And when you start doing manufacturing at scale, you have to have really tight tolerances on your production. So we've found that, within doing a batch of satellites, you can have different power consumptions, which is kind of crazy. And these are just things we never initially thought of. But so then you have to say, well, what's the batch test and how do you screen out stuff that's compliant, non-compliant, all that stuff. And now the satellite's stable. Obviously, pictures are kind of like the holy grail unicorn and something we've been kind of pushing super hard for a while on. So people might have seen this as well. We've also moved facility to a much bigger facility. So this is me in the facility before we put anything in it. So it's now not full of stuff, but it's starting to be filled with stuff. The production highlights this year, September, we had, sort of August, September, we had this big surge internally in Alba where we basically built 5 satellites. I started saying 15 days. Obviously they weren't actually all built in 15 days, but we shipped out, essentially 5 unicorns in 15 days in 2 separate launches, which we now launched November, December, and that was pretty hellish, to be honest, internally. And all the guys at Alba need huge props for the effort they put in there, because that was really, really tough, But we were able to figure out ways to get satellites out the door, and all the tests we threw at them, they passed. Not often the first time, but they did pass before they went out. So, starting to do batch manufacturing and building more than just one at a time and multiple launches simultaneously, that's really, really interesting, And then the other big thing about the facility is it's much larger, So the idea there is to move away from sort of small lab type environment. And there's lots of stuff that doesn't really make sense if you really think about it. If you're trying to do mass production, you really want to, I would kind of call a hot desking environment is how we built satellites, and probably how most people in the room build their satellites is, the bench changes depending on what part of the build you're in. And we're trying to move away from that philosophy to move towards more having dedicated stations for dedicated parts of the process. So there's subsystem assembly, and there's subsystems by subsystem permanently set up. You permanently set up your wire winding machine, you permanently set up your wheel balancing station, you permanently set up your radio testing area, an assembly area. So that's something we can do with a much bigger facility, because we just need a lot more desks. And this is what it looked like about a month after that. So started to fill up with stuff, desks, got a trailer in there. It's maybe not the highest quality picture. We got some stuff in the lobby. Just now it's got even more stuff. It's got a clean room up now. It's still a work in progress. So the vibe test, the vibe table and the breakout chamber actually aren't in yet. They're in a different facility that we operate. So they won't be there, but we're doing tours on, like I said, tours on Wednesdays. So we'll circulate a link for folks to book their slots if they want to come around and see a Pocket Factory. And then the question is, well, why are you building these unicorns? Well, the short-term answer is we want to image Earth at night. So these are 2 examples of ISS photography and VIIRS photography, which are basically, obviously ISS is the ISS space station, but in this context, it's pictures taken by astronauts from the space station. VIIRS is a payload on a bigger satellite. And there's different trade-offs, but essentially, to get regular 25-meter nighttime imagery of Earth is pretty hard. Nobody's really doing it commercially. and it's a big pain in the neck, basically. So as somebody that builds satellites and is trying to find a use case, we're finding a lot of interest in that community, and they're really crying out for a regular, reliable supplier of nighttime data of Earth, which is something we're working on. We have a bunch of clients already signed up for that. So some government stuff, some industry stuff. And like, why the big factory, right? If you're only building a few satellites at nighttime, like, what's the point? But ultimately, our goal is to image everywhere on Earth every 15 minutes, which is the big sort of hairy goal, big audacious goal. No one's ever done that. To do that would be thousands of satellites, So it seems kind of, really hard to do given we're an early stage company, but, we've been able to pull off sort of like small bursts of stuff that could sort of show we could get there with a much bigger team. And I think the thing that's like, people maybe think Alba is much bigger than we are. I mean, we're literally like 12 people and we've launched 18 satellites this year. So the ratio of employees to satellites is, it's inverted, which I think is pretty good, So, huge props to the Alba team again for getting all the stuff done this year that we got done. And this is sort of what it might look like when you're able to just overlay so many pictures and you start to see things moving on Earth throughout the day, which would be pretty cool. And within that, there's a bunch of use cases, wildfire detection being the most sort of obvious one. Maybe just a quick touch on the Alba Connect. So people might be aware or not that we also build ground stations, and they're kind of unique because we build them on trailers, which might be like, why would we do that? But the licensing in the UK is pretty difficult and problematic. So our sort of innovation there is to put the thing on wheels and basically move it to a location where the regulations are friendly. And we found Germany to be a great host for us. We work really closely with 𝗖𝗁𝗁, who's the licensing agency in Germany. Really cool. We have this teleport, I guess you'd call it. It's essentially a field we rented off a farmer in Berlin. This is in June time with the original sort of version of the station. This is the V2 ground station that was doing some testing. So we now have a yard. So basically, we can essentially build it in the factory, roll it out to the backyard, listen in, and then roll it back in for further testing. So it's quite a cool concept because before we didn't have this facility. So essentially, we're moving it from one car park in the UK to another car park in Germany. So that's kind of our kind of con-ops. And then when we have issues remotely, obviously we run them remotely over the internet, but we can basically roll the thing back to, or go pick it up, take it back to Glasgow, do maintenance, and that's what we've been doing on the most recent station is basically giving it an overhaul and an upgrade. So a lot of the guys have been working on that. This is the ground station back in Germany last week on the webcam, looking pretty desolate. Sort of reminding me of James Bond's GoldenEye. There's like a scene where they're in Siberia and there's a satellite command center, and I just remembered it from my childhood, and I thought it was kind of funny that our satellite station looks quite like GoldenEye. So everyone got killed, and that's not good. So hopefully there'll be none of that happening at our satellite ground station.